All right. So we're in here. Um, Give the recording chance to upload a little bit, but so we're back. So this is on Trump and the GE, and Michael Novogratz co-signs Trump and the GE recession talk, and it's the same old, same old. I mean, the Fed recently hiked interest rates 75 basis points to hopefully tamp down inflation, and inflation could be driven by a lot of things. An overheating economy coming out of the pandemic, also driven by dislocations in certain markets as institutions look to price gouge in certain markets and certain sectors of the economy, which we've been talking about for years. That when you put these institutions in charge of stuff, greed and corruption and just takes over. That these institutions are not really good at the country; they really good at their own profits, and now it's out of control. So institutions practically control the country, and the investor class practically controls the country because they have all the resources. Um, and also, it could be some issues related to the war in Ukraine, some dislocations in certain markets, but personal consumption expenditures, which the Fed's definition of inflation, new definition of inflation, which excludes energy, and also excludes rent, has been over 6% for several months, and after the financial crisis, they were trying to get it to 2%. So it shows you how it's overheated, and they need to do something about it. Um, Along with the war in Ukraine, you see gasoline prices, which is not included in PCE. Gasoline prices are going through the roof. Oil prices going through the roof. In the stock market, the oil related companies like Halliburton, Weatherford International, Schlumberger have been doing very well relative to the overall market because gasoline prices have run away, and we can't do much about it now. You saw Biden, who would try to punish Russia for entering the Ukraine and trying to get our allies not to buy gasoline. Now we're buying gasoline. No, excuse me. Now we're buying oil from Russia, and we're buying other things from Russia. So his plans didn't work. So um, we're the populace being faced by rising prices for food, gas, and other things, and doesn't seem like it's going to subside anytime soon. I'm not sure interest rate hikes are going to help in the short term. It will help slow down the economy, though. Um, as far as the market is concerned, will it hurt the market? We'll soon see. I think the market has faced headwinds recently, but it seems like there are inflows into the market over the past couple of weeks. So I think people have been conditioned to think the market is always going to bounce back into about a dip. Um, um, that's basically as far as Fed activity. We've always said that we think we're going to be in a recession. We're already in a recession. That means technically, from layman's terms, the recession is two consecutive quarters of declines in GDP. Q1 GDP fell 1.5%. I couldn't really figure out why nobody else was trumping this, but apparently the Atlanta Fed had thought that Q2 would grow at 0.9%. Now they readjusted that down to 0%. So in a recent article said that the U.S. is already in recession if the Atlanta Fed is right. So they kind of echo what we're saying. Said that America is almost certain to be in a recession when official figures are released, according to early data. An update from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta shows the economy on course for 0% growth in the second quarter of 2022, and the trend from the data would suggest that the economy is on course for a contraction. That would put the U.S. into an official recession defined by economists and policymakers as two consecutive quarters of falling GDP. So they're pretty much echoing what we're saying. And this is coming from the Atlanta Fed. So they think Q2 could be flat.
Yeah.
If it declines, we are officially in a recession. And then I think the CEOs think that we're going to be 60% of CEOs think that we're going to be in a recession by 2023. So it's just a matter of time where it's gonna if it's flat, it's probably going to fall in Q3 and Q4. So just a matter of time. So I think now you see the corporate media so echoing what we're saying.
Yeah, it almost feels strange to get to get validated without credit. I mean, with the without credit feels normal, but to get
I beg your
validated
pardon.
feels strange.
I beg it. I beg your pardon.
I
You mean tell me
said,
somebody echo what we said and didn't credit us, didn't cite the source?
exactly right. That's the part that lets me know we're still on planet Earth. Let me get but yeah, it is a bit strange to find that now, I don't think we've said it before. Kind of the talking heads that have been champion of this more than decades bull run. Talking about how excuse me how healthy the economy is, how healthy markets are, irrespective of what's been happening in real households across the country between student loan debt, mortgage debt, along with the shrinking home supply. No matter how much more challenging it is for an entire generation, really two generations between millennials and then I guess the oldest Gen Zers that are finding themselves in the housing market for the first time, and how much more expensive it is to even have an entry level into the housing market. I mean, almost by default at this point, um, you are entering the housing market at $1 million level. And while for New Yorkers, folks in D.C., San Fran, L.A., Miami, will hear that and think it's normal. Say, well, of course, right? Because they are outliers throughout the rest of the country. But for the rest of the country, that number seems insane when you're not getting more house, you're not getting more land attached to that house. Just what 5, 6 years ago, the median entry point for a home was right around $250,000. Well, that number today has inched closer to $500,000. It's right around 470 at this point. So in less than a decade, it's taken to double, and that's the average, which means that many more places around the country that would not seem to match that you should be paying for the same kind of housing prices that someone in a New York or DC or Boston or Miami or San Fran should be paying. For these same folks that have been talking about how healthy the economy is, ignoring what's happening in real households across the country for the last decade because they've been feeding at the trough of the Fed's QE pumping 80 to $100 billion a month into their friends' pockets. But now all of a sudden it's oh my God, recession. Oh my God, we have to be mindful of Main Street and not Wall Street, and feel like they are in the thicket with the same households that they were stepping on, stepping over, and pulling the rug from under their feet in order to get to that trough of the Federal Reserve's free money program. So, that's it is the strange part to me. Of course, we have to have our contrarians. Even what's his name, Mr. Wonderful, he goes by on Shark Tank, just recently stated
Oh,
that because of rising consumer demand, he feels that that there is no recession, that it is simply hype and and it's unrealistic. Yeah.
let me just get on
Yeah,
TV and say stuff, and a 50% chance I'll be right.
he said, he looks at the economic data every week, and he just doesn't see. Excuse me, he doesn't see the numbers that evidence that we are headed into a recession. So you're going to have people out there that for them, stagnating wages compared to the rising interest rates, that although people for some reason, go figure, people still need roofs over their heads, they still need gas in their vehicles, they still need food on their table and clothes on their back. It's weird. It's a weird concept to to think that people still need those things. So because people still need those things and there's still a demand for those things, then me reading the demand for those things must be evidence that the economy is not headed toward a recession. I mean, that's pretty much the argument
Well, but on that point
that's
though,
being made.
they've been saying the same thing for the past decade, and this hasn't been a recession. So the Fed is kind of like, or the investor class has kind of made them right, but keep spending, 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 even though we know it's not sustainable. And the other thing is that now the media has made it seem like if you want to own a home, or if you want to go to college, or if you want a family of four, that's a luxury. You have to have a very
Right,
good excuse why you want to own a home and why you want to get a bank
right.
loan, why you want $2 million bank loan for a home,
Yep,
and why you want to get a $500,000, $300,000 student loan. You have
yep.
to have a very good excuse why you want that. Why having kids are a luxury. You're supposed to be single for the rest of your life and work hard and not have kids. And if you get to go to college, get to own a home, you should thank the country.
Excuse me. That's absolutely it. That the American dream is being now positioned as in a lot of ways, like you say, that a luxury, but even more so a privilege. And for some, I think that that's always been the propaganda behind the American dream and American exceptionalism, is that it's positioned from a kind of a foreign policy perspective as privilege, meaning for those outside of U.S. borders looking in to the U.S., that this is a privilege to be able to come into these borders and to be able to participate in the race for the American dream, and those that attain it are even more privileged, and it is a luxury in that sense. However, from a domestic lens, it has it is now taken on that life, so to speak, because more and more and more people within the population are getting farther and farther and farther away from that attainment. It is, for many households, it's not reasonable. Let's not even talk about luxury. Let's not talk about whether the home has to be sitting on 2 acres of land and a 4-car garage, etc. It is that's not the conversation that's being had. It is can you even afford a studio, a 1 bedroom? Certainly for places like New York, D.C., Boston, where for example, New York, the median apartment rent prices have jumped closer to $5,000 a month. Like just what 4 years ago, that number was sitting right around 3,500. So this is to me a concerted effort, uh, especially from a home owner lens, to turn so many new home buyers or new market participants, along with existing homeowners, into renters. When we look at what has happened with Redfin, when we look at what's happened with Zillow, um, where they have bought up so many parcels of homes, and the inability to resell those homes at higher prices and inflated prices, aka price gouging. um, but the more insidious part of that story that's lesser told is that in order to get folks out of their homes, what these corporations were doing were offering homeowners significantly over ask to incentivize said homeowner to sell. The and while if you no longer need a home, that's a great scenario. That's your best case scenario. Hey, I bought this thing for $200,000, a decade ago or 15 years ago, and now I've sold the thing at $500,000. That's a great return. Perfect story. But if you are in the position that soon as you sell that home, you still need a place to rest your head, well, good luck finding
Well, you're an
another
idiot. Well,
home.
you're an idiot, basically.
Right, like many homeowners, or I should say, former homeowners that have recently sold their homes, and especially those that, essentially baby boomer generation. So those that are either closer, well, baby boomers are fully in retirement. I think the entire generation at this point is fully in retirement age, or at least close to it. But the majority of those homeowners that have recently sold in the last few years, a certain percentage of them have now found themselves unable to afford to purchase again, and are now relegated to being a renter. I was like, boy, that's a hell of a magic trick that you have been subtly turning the existing home owner market, one percentage at a time, into a high value renters market. And that's the lesser told story here. And it is to me it is the canary in the mine, that corporate interests to own the residential home, the home market in the U.S. is not only speculative, it's happening. Like, it's no longer a rumor. It's no longer a thing that needs to be fact checked by AP News. That, whether BlackRock stated that they want to own the U.S. Housing market. Like, no, we're watching it happen in real time. In other words, so even our inflationary environment, our recessionary environment, is masking in some ways what's happening under the surface of that, and moving this economy, even what could arguably be a small percentage, but when you take even 10% or 20% of homeowners and turn them into high valuable renters, then that changes the dynamic of the economy. That changes that American dream attainment, because now you're telling a younger generation, so whether it's millennials, whether it's Gen Zers, that the likelihood of them being able to participate on that level Hey, listen, I hope all of y'all have a game plan to become, social media millionaires, because that that's what it's going to take just to simply enter the market. In other words, because you are in competition with corporate interest. You're in competition with one of the largest asset managers on the planet. You're in competition with private equity. You're in competition with hedge funds. You're in competition with algorithms that I think we talked about that the last episode, that gentleman who doesn't even live in Atlanta got an award for being the highest selling real estate agent in the Atlanta area. And he did it because he built an algorithm that he sells to private equity and hedge funds and institutional capital like BlackRock, in order to take advantage of the arbitrage between low in a relative sense, housing offers, and snapping them up at a significantly faster rate than home seekers as individuals can do. You're still reading through the equivalent of the classifieds as a home seeker. Meanwhile, they're dealing with AI tools that can do an entire search of the entire U.S. housing market in minutes. How do you compete with that as an individual? These are the competing factors that home seekers are against. So, in other words, we're watching this thing happen in real time. That the landscape of the country is changing, and is not changing for the good. It's not changing for the better, and that's the problem.
Okay, a couple of things. What you described is what Wall Street was doing before the financial crisis. They're trying to
Yeah,
own the
with,
housing
with
market through mortgage-backed
mortgage-backed
securities.
securities,
So you
CDOs.
break, you bail them out, and they get a do-over, and Barack Obama goes somewhere and he's off somewhere. You can't find him anymore.
He got his $8 million
Right,
house in Georgetown,
right,
and his other couple houses in Martha's
right.
Vineyard, and one of the highest, one of the highest, what do they call it, advances, book
Yeah,
advances in history.
right,
So
right. So he's
the
off some. Right,
Obamas are going to do okay while they continue to tell you to pull up your pants,
right,
and to walk and talk a certain
right.
way.
You give Wall
Uh,
Street, they give him a do-over,
yep,
doing the exact same thing they were doing before the financial crisis. And you tell people about it, look at you like you're crazy.
yep.
Talking about this 10 years ago. And so we're here now. The and you got young people who should be making decisions, who are going to be making decisions for us. They're they can't make, they either won't or can't make a connection back to the Obama administration or to these rappers and celebrities and comedians who have, or this cabal of black journalists and black professors who've been co-signing
Yep.
the Obama administration for a check. So you got young people who's supposed to be intelligent, don't read, they on social media and just trying to fit in, and and want to perform and do a public performance that's on trend, but basically talking against their own self interest. It's almost the same problem. I can't connect the dots to how we got here, which is crazy to me. But anyway, so we're here now. On the point about people co-signers, I see Van Jones constantly repeating what we're saying. I remember I put up an article that Obama had made this guy the new governor of the state of Virginia, this Republican, I can't think of his name now, the guy who won for the state of Virginia. And after he won, Van Jones said, "Yeah, I think people who are not in our echo chamber don't believe what we believe. They think that Democratic Party
Right.
is out
Yeah,
of touch
yeah.
and is out of touch and annoying. He never cites the source. And a couple of days ago, he said that talking about the Democratic Party that they're losing. That they speak in these goofy terms like Latinx and BIPOC to the elites who are doing pretty well, and then they promise very poor people that they're going to do something like give them reparations. So there's no in between. So they're losing the labor class, which is what we've been saying. And he seems like a genius. The Democratic Party has lost the labor class. They have the elites and they have the economically poor. They promise them stuff like reparation. They talk in circles and talk in these silly language that don't make sense. He said he never seen a Latinx before. And he doesn't know what BIPOC means. And the people in nail salons and barbershops don't know what BIPOC means. They said that Democratic Party is completely goofy. And I think people mad at him for saying that, but he's kind of repeating what we were saying. So he obviously watches Trump and G. I wish he'd give us a shout out, but that's neither here nor there. Excuse me, neither here nor there, but just a matter of time before we hit into recession, and we'll see what happens after that. But it seems like the investor class is going to be doing pretty well, and we'll see what the Biden administration can do if it rings in another second term for Donald Trump or not. But now we see other people sort of talking about and engaged in this recession talk as well. Other than the Atlanta Fed. The Atlanta Fed is sort of resigned to reality that as soon as we say it's going to be a recession, they repeat it verbatim. And now you have this investor Michael Novogratz, who's a big crypto guy. And I've been aware of Michael Novogratz for a while because I coach a team called New York Stock Exchange, a travel team in New York. He coached a team called the City. He's behind a team called the City. I knew there was some big money invested behind the City. And Donovan Mitchell, who plays for the Utah Jazz, played for them. So I've always seen them in basketball circles. We tried to get them to come to our tournament. They never did, the City. But they were pretty good. They were pretty good, and these kids came out of nowhere, and they were well-funded. That's how I heard who Michael Novogratz was. And he had a son named Wolfie. Wolfie to play point guard. Was a pretty good basketball player. I think he's an actor now. But that's how I became a Michael Novogratz, long before he became known for crypto. So in basketball circle, and they had this guy named Donovan Mitchell before he became known as the Spider.
Right.
And before he went to Louisville, and then on to the NBA. But anyway, so he's talking about the next recession, and a recent article in Newsweek said the economy is on the verge of collapse, said a Wall Street veteran. In an interview published by MarketWatch on Wednesday, financial veteran and crypto investor Michael Novogratz, interviewed by MarketWatch before the Federal Reserve decided to increase interest rates, said the country is heading into the likelihood of a really fast recession. He said the economy is going to collapse. We're going to a really fast recession. You can see that in lots of ways. Housing is starting to roll over. Inventories have exploded. There are layoffs in multiple industries, and the Fed is stuck with the position of having to hike interest rates until inflation rolls over. So, I think that it's symbolic also, but I think it's also kind of gives you an idea of what corporate interests are thinking. If they think we're going to be in a recession, they're probably going to pull back on spending. Right. And you think you're also seeing in the housing market, you don't see multifamily housing starts rising as much. Who's going to rent these places? Who's going to buy these places? You can build, but who's going to buy these places? And I came out of college in the late 80s and worked in the Washington, D.C. area. And Washington, D.C. had been overbuilt. There were malls everywhere. And real estate developers were filing bankruptcy every day. The difference is that they didn't have the Federal Reserve and the president spiking asset prices to help them with their bad investment decisions. So, after the financial crisis, you made a bad investment decision. It wasn't a bad investment decision. It was somebody else's fault. And you can get the government and the Federal Reserve to spike asset prices under the guise of growing the economy or helping the country. You're helping your donors and people who put you in office. or people you want to work for when you leave office. That's who you're helping. So all of a sudden, if you make a bad investment decision, it wasn't your fault. You have to have the Fed and the government paper over your bad investment decisions. So now you have a guy who's from the investor class is saying that we're heading for a recession. I think that he probably represents a large part of the investor class who's going to pull back, and they're going to hoard the cash. So at least you'll see investments in certain industries won't keep rising, but they're probably not going to spend either. Michael Novogratz probably has 18 houses already. He probably has 20 cars. Is he going to buy another car? Is he going to buy another toaster oven? Is he going to buy another? Is he going to buy another refrigerator or another microwave? Probably has several. That's what drives the economy. Probably has several. And this is who the government has been propping up: people who don't need another microwave or don't need another car. People who need the stuff they can't get access to, capital. So that's what's trickling down. What's trickling down is higher prices, and then you're gonna have people who as the economy begins to slow, you can maybe see job opportunities dry up, and while prices are rising, so you're going to see a period of stagflation. But I think he may be, again, another canary in the coal mine where you see he could be representative of the investor class who feels that, the economy isn't as strong as it used to be. And now the Fed is stopping quantitative easing. There's no reason to invest alongside the Fed. The Fed's not investing anymore. The Fed's pulling back. There's no reason to invest in certain markets if markets not going to go up simply because they're going up because the Fed is providing a floor on a certain markets, whether it's housing or the stock market. He's also happened to be a big crypto investor. I saw crypto prices fell about to 20,000 this week, then it went back up to 21,000, I think, on Friday. And so you see a lot of people who invest in crypto. I'm not saying that it's a bad investment, but some people have made money in crypto. But at what point does it collapse? If everything else is collapsing, you see crypto collapsing. And this guy's a big crypto investor. Is he going to pull back his investments in crypto? And you see there's certain stocks like MicroStrategies, I think Square, that have big investments in crypto. I think MicroStrategies even has I think they even have a call on some of their loans if crypto falls below a certain level.
Yep.
And I think that's less talked about in the marketplace, where you have one of the biggest crypto investors think we're going into a recession. So,
No,
what does that say for the crypto market or Bitcoin or whatever?
right. It's and to your earlier point, I'm not sure that folks outside of I think people that have a strong interest in economics, and certainly those that are degreed in economics and finance. So in other words, like outside of that relatively small percentage of people as compared to the rest of the population, I'm not sure that folks connect those dots that you just brought up regarding Michael Novogratz's consumption levels, and it's one of the things that even Kevin O'Leary is really gravitating towards when he says that when he looks at the data, he sees no indication of there being a recession, simply because of consumer demand continues to rise. And what folks may not be able to connect the dots between the fact that it's not the investor class, is not the kind of the Michael Novogratzes of the country, where they're more than likely not going to need another vehicle, let alone another 100 vehicles, let alone another 100 homes, let alone another 40 pair of shoes, all in a single quarter, let alone another 4 quarters.
Unless
And
you're
why
married
that's
to Imelda,
important.
unless you're married to Imelda Marcos, right? The lady with the shoe The shoe inventory.
Lord. But yeah, and I guess shout outs to the Sun for recently winning as well. Trying to reestablish that Marcos legacy in the Philippines. He's the new the new president, and Duterte's daughter is the new vice president. So I'll let you guys, I'll let the viewers, debate on what that means. But but anyway, back essentially, I'm not sure that folks are really connecting that dot between consumer demand, which just on a very basic demand, supply and demand premise. Like even currently, there's still about a 3 million home supply gap between demand. Like, in other words, there are 3 million more folks that are seeking homes than supply actually meets. So what does that mean? Very rudimentary, very rudimentary way is that it's telling the asset owners and the investor class that great, demand is there and demand is even higher. So what are we going to do in turn? Pump up the prices. And now we get a high inflationary environment. We get closer and closer to hyperinflation environment because of the gap between supply and demand. And when you have a population that needs some of these things, yes, are discretionary spending, such as, the toaster oven that, has a Bluetooth and a and a 1080p screen attached to it to allow you to see that your toast is being perfectly toasted in ways that didn't exist before. Do folks need that? Absolutely not. But do they want that? Sure, there's data that supports that. But when we look at kind of the Maslow's hierarchy, there are certain things that we need versus what we want. And I hope that there is no debate about wallet share and about discretionary spending. Over the last decade, we've watched discretionary spending, drive through the roof. However, it's been directly attached to a running bull market, has been directly attached to quantitative easing. The problem with that, as we're seeing presently, that we're on the verge of a credit crisis, a bankruptcy crisis when it comes to homeowners, like mortgage bankruptcies, mortgage defaults. So in other words, the last decade for a significant amount of the population has been on credit. That discretionary spending has not been a result of higher wages, higher participants that have increased their net worth, that have gone from, being thousandaires to 100,000aires, and then from 100,000aires to multimillionaires. In other words, have there been a small percentage of folks that have turned into multimillionaires? In the last 2 years, the most amount of billionaires have been made than what the previous 4 decades combined. So we've seen that a small percentage of the population has absolutely increased their overall net worth. But when we look at default rates, when we look at the rising credit per household, the amount of credit that's being used per household to purchase everyday items, toilet paper. We need that. You could forego the fancy toaster oven because you need toilet paper. The ability to purchase groceries, the ability to purchase not an excessive amount of clothes, but clothes because you have growing children. Clothes because, so in other words, necessities, the amount of necessities that are on borrowed time, the percentage of utilization of credit rates have increased per household. And that's not a good sign at all. That means that over the past decade, that a lot of this kind of partying that has been happening, the discretionary spending, Amazon stock is blown through the roof because more and more people are using Amazon, more and more people are using Alibaba, more and more people are purchasing things at Walmart and Target and online shopping. But when we see the sources of that, it is on borrowed time because they've been using credit, because they've
Mm.
been using loans, because they've been using these things that come with a higher interest rate that will then in turn come due. The bill is due. and and we've seen not only individuals, but we were all, which we've talked about many times over, one of the biggest differences between um, '08 and '09 and what today would bring is the significant sharper rise in corporate debt. And the U.S. corporate debt has been at its highest in history just in the last half decade or so. So it's not simply households or individuals that are faced with looming debt, with looming defaults. It is also corporate interests that are facing those same issues because the difference between corporations that have to rely on discretionary spending of their customers puts them in a similar boat. In other words, and one prime example of that is Family Dollar. Family Dollar, the kind of the running joke with Family Dollar is that, well, when are when are they going to change it from Family Dollar to Family $2? Because nothing in there is a dollar
Mm.
any longer, and it hasn't been a dollar for quite some time. In other words, so when you look at corporations that rely on the discretionary spending of the U.S. consumer, and the U.S. consumer is also borrowing to be able to walk into a Family Dollar and a Target and a Walmart, then that puts those corporations that have had to borrow to continue to put supply on the shelves. Now you have this almost Ponzi scheme uh, getting exposed and is going to crumble very soon. In other words, because there's only so many corporations that can take out commercial paper. There's only so many U.S. consumers that have the room to put more debt on the balance sheet. Banks their have already increased their suitability and credit worthy metrics. So, in other words, the ability to get a loan, the ability to get a credit card has tightened significantly. And, only those that fit a specific credit profile will have the ability to borrow from traditional lines. So what does that mean? That means that we're going to see more folks going into the payday loans, more folks going into the predatory loan schemes, such as cash advance, such as essentially money off the street, is what we call it. So in other words, these kind of this black market for lending which you're talking about rates at 2, 3, sometimes up to 1,200%. I think there was a documentary as an example. What was that? Maybe close to 10 years ago or so, maybe a little more recently, on the payday lending in Tennessee, and specifically, I believe specifically within Memphis as well, that there are more payday lenders on corners than there are churches and liquor stores in Memphis. But it was highlighting that whole predatory environment where you have folks that are getting paid $400 and $500 a week, and they're taking out payday loans that they owe literally thousands of dollars a week and can never get from under. They can almost never earn enough money within that market to be able to simply pay off a loan that they got against a $400 or $500 a week check.
Right.
So, in other words, it's creating a scenario that folks aren't necessarily having the ability to connect those dots. Why is it more expensive when I purchase these things? Why do I have less options to be able to get a loan to help pay for some of our children's student loans? Why is it when we look at the amount of parent loans, how many parents send their children off to college in hopes that they gain a degree and be able to get a job to stand on their own 2 feet, and more parents have aging children in their 30s still being roommates because they can't afford a place. But it's not only that, it is the debt that has come along with that, because many of those same parents have taken out parent loans in order to send their children to college. And not in every case do those children finish, because they no longer have money to continue paying the tuition at the 24% rate on average. That tuition has risen every year.
Well,
Tuition rate.
well, even on that point though, even during the financial crisis, these wealthy colleges, their investment portfolios were underwater.
That's
Ben
it.
Bernanke went to Ivy League school. Janet Yellen went to Ivy League school. Jerome Powell, Obama, they all went to Ivy League school. You don't think they know that you don't think they know they helping Harvard, Penn, Yale, and Princeton? Think they
100%.
don't
I
know that?
mean,
And Columbia?
Yale had the largest, over $100 billion. Yale had the largest endowment. Excuse me, endowment fund of all colleges. At one point, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago,
Right.
over $100 billion. What the heck is a college, a higher institution, doing with an endowment fund that is being treated like an investment account?
Right.
The purpose of the
You,
endowment
you,
fund is to be able to provide scholarships to students that need the financial assistance, and you're just constantly growing this as an asset. And when we look at the rate of, and specifically with Yale as a prime example of this, when you look at the percentage of students that got scholarships awarded out of the endowment fund from Yale compared to the total student population of Yale, it is closer to the same rate that the velocity of money has been with throughout the country. When we see banks that have trillions of dollars on their balance sheets, some of the highest numbers in history that these banks have had just in the last decade due to quantitative easing. But when we look at the rate of loans that they are putting out to get that money into the real economy, you're talking about a rate of less than 2%. That's why the velocity of money metric has been at its lowest in history, including the Great Depression.
Yeah, but my point is that you have the Obama administration and the Federal Reserve purposely enabling these wealthy colleges and enabling Wall Street's bad behavior. You're
That
enabling them.
it is constantly incentivized, and that's kind of my point, that I'm not sure that folks on a very real level are connecting those dots.
Right?
Are
That's a
being,
silliness. That's a
say that again.
silliness of it all. We keep talking. That's a silliness of it all. We keep talking about the problem. We need to do something about this. If you can't identify how it happened, you won't. Or you can or you won't identify how we got here. How can you fix it?
Right,
I got high blood pressure. I need to do something about it. Well, how do you have to diagnose how you got the high blood pressure?
right, right, and that's kind of part of the issue. And I think a large swath of the population are dealing with the material realities simply in a bit of a silo, meaning when it hits their particular situation. So whether that entry point or whether that friction point is being a home seeker, whether that friction point is trying to purchase, excuse me, trying to purchase a vehicle, a family vehicle, trying to go back to school or maybe even go to school for the first time, trying to find a job that allows them, like, one job, not having, one job and 17 different sources of income and side hustles, but just trying to find one job that can pay their rent and pay their groceries and afford to have a family comfortably. So, in other words, it is those friction points that people tend to start noticing this pattern, but not necessarily understanding how each of those touch points are the same side of the same coin. In other words, and I think the more that folks are able to connect those dots, this is one. There. It is not to say that people are just blanketly ignorant, right? One prime example of that was the Occupy Wall Street movement. Irrespective of the critiques about how well the movement was organized, et cetera, whatever one feels about the movement itself and the usefulness, put that aside for a moment and specifically look at the fact that here is evidence that more and more folks are connecting those dots and have collectivized to come together, because whatever your friction point, so whether your friction point was the labor market, whether your friction point was the housing market, whether your friction point was the auto loan market, whether your friction point was the credit card market, debt market, healthcare, whatever your friction point was, more and more people were collectivizing. We call it crowdsourcing now. But in other words, collectively coming together, realizing that although I may have entered and from a knowledge standpoint that this game is rigged, life has been rigged. So even though I may have come through a different door than someone else, but now we're all in the same room and are now able to crowdsource our information and see that, wait a minute, same issues. I'm having healthcare cost issues. You're having home ownership issues. You're having credit card issues or student loan issues, but we're actually having the same issue because it's the same problem, in other
Right.
words,
Right.
and it's the same source of problem. And that is the evidence that more and more people uh, collectively came together. Since then, though, I'm not certain that that same level of awareness has continued to permeate. the population at the same rate. Ironically, after I'm not even sure that Occupy Wall Street has completely gone away. Like, in other words, the movement, although the visibility has significantly decreased compared to 2010, 2011, and pretty much up to about right around like 2012 or 2013 or so, is visibly decreased. More social justice movements have taken the fore, but have they completely disappeared? But one of the things that I'm not seeing is that collective awareness,
Well,
right?
that was the point. That was the whole point, though, right? That's why they broke
Right,
Occupy Wall Street. That's why they broke it.
right. And
These
that
people,
is part of the
these
point.
people were protesting peacefully, which is their right, and
Yep,
they're doing the country a service. They're doing the country a service by protesting and pointing out this is a problem.
100%,
I remember
100%.
CNBC kept complaining about Occupy Wall Street,
Yep, they got attacked for being,
how they
for
dressed, how they
being
looked,
useless,
right,
millennials
right,
and trust fund babies
right,
and taking up precious public space.
right. Because
It was some of the critiques were valid. Some of the critiques were clearly propaganda pushed by mainstream media. But one of the things that they continued to bury was, why are folks there?
right.
They continued to bury the reason that folks are no longer disillusioned with the economy and understood very clearly that this was not an instance of what it Greenspan called it, irrational exuberance.
Mm,
This wasn't the result of just the population simply taking on more discretionary spending. Like, oh, you just didn't know how to balance a budget. In other words, as a household, and now you want other folks to pay for your bad decisions. So no, that's not what was happening. What was happening was that folks were waking up to the fact that there was predatory lending practices, that it was a conspiracy, an actual conspiracy, because between policymakers, bankers, hedge fund managers, the investor class collectively came together. Look at Wells Fargo, biggest fraud in the history of banks, and then the Supreme Court rules that you can't sue banks. Huh? Are we living in the same country? Like, what?
yeah,
It's, you know what I mean? Like, that is freaking collusion
yeah,
at
but
that point.
yeah,
And
but Occupy Wall Street. Well, I remember the first criticism. I went down there, the precursor to Occupy Wall Street. I can't think of the name of the group that was down there, and they were down there protesting.
in the FIDI district, well,
Yeah, it was before. It was a
yeah,
precursor to Occupy Wall Street. They were protesting peacefully. They were
right,
basically
right.
pointing out what's going on with the system and blah 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 blah. And obviously, they were pointing out something that was accurate because CNBC kept complaining about them. Look how they dress. Look at what they're
Right.
doing. They go to work and blah blah blah. And Erin Burnett, remember, she kept complaining about Occupy Wall Street. Her husband worked at Citigroup,
Yeah.
and they got a big bailout from Citigroup. So she and her family benefited directly from bailout money from the government.
Got it.
And Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, is pointing it out. And so they basically they complained so much to the I guess the cops went down there and said, you don't have a permit to be out here, right? And made them move.
Uh,
Don't they still have people on the street now? Don't they have homeless? Are they trying to find places for homeless people to live now? But they weren't trying to find a place for Occupy Wall Street to live. They broke Occupy Wall Street, and what came on later was Black Lives Matter. And you don't hear anybody
right.
complain about Black Lives Matter at the same rate they were complaining about Occupy Wall Street, because Black Lives Matter was toothless. It was just somebody who wanted to get a bag, and they weren't going to do anything. They weren't going to change anything. That's the difference.
That's it, man.
Whoever the corporate media is complaining about, that's who is being affected. Occupy Wall Street was affected, and they broke it.
Yep.
So the cops said, you guys gotta leave because now you see the whole world watching Occupy Wall Street and saying capitalism can't work in the United States, and these people are telling the truth, and we're still back here. We're back here now to what Occupy Wall Street said a decade ago. And they broke
Exactly.
Occupy Wall Street, but what we have now, because the government controls and institutions control so much of the economy, the government decides whether the stock market goes up or down. The Fed buying stocks, the stocks go up. The Fed stop buying stocks, stocks go down. The Fed's cut interest rates to help people, help asset prices for real estate, whatever. Real estate goes up. They don't, it goes down. So now you have these resources in the hand of very few people, and you have a lord and a vassal and a serfdom sort of society. You have the rest of the country have to beg these people with the resources for stuff, beg them for jobs, beg them to have access to certain markets. You have to beg the government for stuff, which is what the government and the Federal Reserve wanted all along. It was all
Right.
orchestrated. Now you got to beg the government for something. Anytime you want to get something in this country, you have to beg the government on your knees, get on your hands and knees, and beg the government for it. Now we have a lord and a vassal and a serf society, which is orchestrated all along, which is what they wanted all along, and it it manifests itself in various ways. Occupy Wall Street. Now you see people, all the social unrest. We got to do something about guns. No, why these people want to grab guns and go shoot somebody? Why are these
Right.
people unhappy? We got to do something about guns, and so they keep creating this narrative about away from the policy and away from these failed policies from the government and from the Federal Reserve and from these institutions, and the fact that the corporate media won't tell you the truth. They try to create a separate narrative about we got to do something about guns. It's gun culture in this country. Then you have social unrest. Why are people so unhappy? Then you have the opiate crisis. We need to do something about prescription opiates. Then you take the prescription opiates away, and guess what? People still getting high, and the drug overdose deaths are still rising. Now we need to do something about fentanyl dealers. That's it.
Right. Right.
People unhappy, and that's it. You don't see any social unrest on Wall Street or among the investor class because they got bailed out. They
Right.
keep being supported year after year after year. So then you see all these fissures and all these events that manifest that people are unhappy and that the economy is not working for everybody, and the government and the corporate media is going to turn it around. They're going to create a false narrative, and turn it around on the individuals. Well, you should have learned how to code. You should become a hedge fund manager. You know what I'm saying? The same thing
Yeah.
they did with the gun cult with the mass shootings back in the '80s. They turned it on made the victim the suspect. You want a single parent family. You
Right.
are you have a predilection towards avarice, and you are depraved, and you didn't ace your SAT scores. It's like
No,
your fault.
we are seeing exactly that. To even add to that, it's now the focus and attention, and really the go to is, well, we're in the middle of a mental health crisis. Are we? Are we? Because I challenge that. Are we in the middle of a mental health crisis, or is it that the investor class, corporations, along with the Fed, have choked the shit out of the economy? So much so that the opportunities to be able to not become a billionaire, to not become a multimillionaire, to not have 17 different side hustles, and for you to be making 40 TikToks and social media a day because Gary Vee told you the rate of attention is the new currency, and you ain't side hustling enough 24/7 with no sleep? Or is it that because every opportunity, in order for you to participate, just to have a productive life, has been manipulated and choked through policies, through collusion on a corporate level, through collusion on a federal government level? Hey, if you can't afford six figures to get a degree, how are you going to be able to get six figures in a lot of ways to afford the life that is now 20 times more expensive than even 15 years ago? In other words, right now you have to kind of walk a certain path in order to know the right people, get in the right doors, simply to afford a decent life, which should have been the easily attainable part. Like, should folks have to take on six-figure amounts of debt simply to get a degree? Because at the end of the day, I can't trade that degree in. I can at least flip the house. I can't flip the degree. I at least can
Right.
sell the family car if I need some cash. I can't sell the degree.
Right. So if you get,
But
let's say you get a college degree, you have to go work for people with the resources, right? You say, I don't want to work for people with the
100%.
resources. I don't want to go work for XYZ institution. I'm gonna start my own business, blah blah blah. And you develop something, you have to sell it to the people with the resources.
Exactly.
You follow what I'm saying?
Exactly.
If they
So you
wanted you to
have
do
to,
that, if they wanted you to do, if they wanted to buy something, they want you to work for them. Follow.
right.
And so they don't have
So
to
in other
buy anything. They
words,
don't have to buy anything from you. They can just copy it.
right. And so now you're put in a position of perpetuating the same system that has forced you to make a decision that's the equivalent of a rock and a hard place. That either you go against maybe your moral or ethic code in
Really?
order to just get the bag.
Really?
You have to get the
This is
bag in order to secure it. There is no room to worry about family, to worry about friends, to make sure that your community has outlets and ways to be able to secure themselves and to get ahead, and not even in a multi-million or billionaire way of getting ahead, but simply to afford a roof over their heads, food on the table, clothes on your back, and have a little bit left over after you pay bills so that you're not struggling every single month and having to jump online and find the 52 different side hustles in order for you to be able to just simply afford to pay your bills.
and all that, all those different ways that you have to sell yourself or to go against your values or whatever. It's a show unto itself.
Right,
It's a
right,
separate show unto itself. All the things you have to do because you know the people with the resources and people who don't. But
right. And that's absolutely it. So it's I think more and more that, and that's why I say, are we in the middle of a mental health crisis, or is it that more and more people continue to bump their heads against the wall of corporate interests, against the wall of investor class interests that, in my opinion, frankly, own the government?
you know, and we're
Because
going
the
to be
government
back
is no longer elected officials. We no longer elect the
right,
government.
and we're going to be
The,
back to where we
the,
were. We're going to be back to where we were in 2008. Except for it's worse now because now it's the chess the chessboard is even more rigged against you. So what
exactly.
happens? Okay, so what happens when the government finally announces that we're in a recession? What happens then?
I
Because
mean,
we just, this is
other than
all right
what,
now.
other
It's
than
all sort of
continuing,
right now. It's all sort of hypothetical, right? Because now you can always because it hasn't been officially announced, and you can always have a guy on Shark Tank looking at
right.
these the data. The data says we're not in a
I
recession.
mean, people are going to still continue to live their lives. It's going to be more expensive to continue to live your life. And that's really what it boils down to. That the the dependency to get money is going to go into hyper mode. We're going to see more and more folks compromising themselves, compromising their family and friends in order to kind of secure the bag, so to speak, because they don't want to be the victim at the end of the day. They don't want to be the one that has to get an EBT card, have to get food stamps, have to rely on welfare in order to provide for their families. I think we're going to see an exacerbation of the working poor, right? A thing that we've been talking about for years. That it's not the focus on the homeless population where it should be a focus on them. So it's certainly not to take attention from them, but I think we have a larger percentage of the population that is working homeless. The working poor, folks that have white collar jobs that you need a degree, and they are poor. They're living in nearly abject poverty. So that is the even greater issue, and I think we're going to see more and more folks that are working poor move into the working homeless. So to me, that's what a recession kind of looks like. Is that a larger swath of the economy of the population is forced to come out of their homes, to come out of the cities that they call homes, and not just the city. It's not just urban environments, but it's affecting the suburban environments as well. I think you're going to see folks begin to look more and more into rural areas, just to simply be able to afford life. You're going to you're going to see more and more corporations. Like we're already seeing. I'm trying to think of, because you're seeing more and more corporations turn to these kind of lowbrow tactics that are usually reserved for kind of the individual that the entrepreneurial individual that needs to sell something in order to make up for the lack of dependable income that maybe their one or two jobs are already providing. You're going to see more and more people participating in a gig economy, but even corporations themselves are moving into places. In other words, when it comes to sales tactics, when it comes to procurement, the things that have been largely relegated for the lower end of the marketplace. When Target and Walmart and these big box stores and corporations are moving into the same tactics that typically individuals that don't have access to capital have to get creative in order to sell their product or service, and you see large corporations moving into those same tactics.
Right, right,
That, like in other words, that is the crack in the foundation
right.
that is telling you this is a significantly larger problem than is being pushed, talked about by certainly corporate media interests, in
Right.
other words. So that's my overall point, is that even corporations that are arguably well financed, well funded, have a significant amount of cash on hand, and they're moving into the same kind of guerrilla marketing tactics, and they're
Right.
moving into the same sales tactics that the lower end of the market have to participate in because they don't have the resources. That's a problem, and that's a
Right.
significant problem, in other
Right.
words, because
I got you.
now even your ability to kind of hustle and now becomes encroached on by those with 10,000 times the capital that you have as an individual.
And they're
And you're
competing
finding
with your
yourself,
own capital, because you're a customer target.
Exactly. So you find yourself competing in direct means against an Amazon.
Right.
There's, like even Amazon is a prime example of that. There are many, Jesus, the many examples of Amazon, how they have essentially taken even those business owners that sell on Amazon and doing a few $1 million a year in sales. Doesn't mean that those few millions of dollars a year are going in that individual's pocket, but they're making a few $1 million a year. And Amazon, because they're using AWS, has access to their entire vendor list, their entire supplier list, their entire manufacturer list. And what does Amazon do? They go out and build the same thing that the small business owner has built.
Right.
And they're able to offer it at 40% less than what that small business owner is able to offer it. And why? Because they have the cash to be able to do it at a loss for Amazon. So
Right.
why would Amazon do such a thing? Because for them, it's the cost of market share.
I got you.
Bezos straight up told y'all 20 years ago that he wants to own well, not e-commerce. He wants to own the commerce in the country.
Uh,
Like he wants Amazon to be the sole source of all commerce in this country. He said that. I would just, oh, he's an ambitious white man. Let's
right.
pat him on
Right.
the
Right.
back and give him
Right.
more money.
Right.
And it's at all costs. It started with authors. How many authors have formed groups and how many lawsuits have gone against Amazon for aggressive antitrust tactics?
Right.
This continues to be a pervasive issue where you're seeing larger corporations competing against the small business owner. And FYI, for folks that don't know, 85% of the economy are built of businesses that make less than $1 million a year.
Right.
That is
Right.
the economy. When we
Right.
talk about the real economy, when I say the real economy, that's what I'm talking about.
Right. 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 And
It's
so
not
you.
the investor class. It's not that 4% of corporations that are publicly traded that make north of $1 billion a year.
Uh,
That's less than 4% of businesses.
right. Right. So while we're
That
talking now, Amazon's in a board meeting right now. Some and some offsite board meeting. Some
right,
nice place, and they're drawing up new ways to make money, and they're probably trying to figure out, well, we can start selling Girl Scout cookies and compete with the Girl Scouts. That's profit in that.
this is it.
So like this shark just keep eat. You got LeBron James wants to start a podcast, and you have and what they're basically exploiting the fact that you have individuals who so dumb they can't see the handwriting on the wall, and it's like the movie. I hate to bring into movies, but the movie Braveheart, where William Wallace runs around to the other tribes around Scotland and saying, we need to band together. And they say, okay, yeah, let's band together because after Long Chase comes from William Wallace, it's coming for us next. It's
Right,
better for us to band together. And you got
right,
people extolling LeBron because he wants to start a podcast. You got the shop. You got how many more ways the guy makes money for the NBA playing basketball. How many more ways can he make money that compete with other individuals?
right,
And you got
right,
individuals who can't see. All they know, well, he's a billionaire. And this guy's a billionaire. How many times can this guy come encroach on what you're doing? He never buys from you, but always sells to you. His country to become rich. Whose podcast is he on? I
That's
mean, how many
exactly
girls?
it,
I
bro.
mean, you ever see him buying Girl Scout cookies? LeBron, I can sell Girl Scout cookies too, like them. So it's like it's you have the populace is just kind of like that's into this. Well, I mean, anyway, a lot of people who just go have 9 to 5, they don't really understand this, and they don't know it, but we know it because we can see that people, Van Jones is copying what we're saying, but they never promote what we're doing. But at the end of the day, I think you're going to see a perpetual recession where people like you said, the working poor who have to commute an hour and a half. You have people who the labor class have to commute like 90 minutes to work every day, back and forth. They can't afford to live in San Francisco or whatever. And I think you're gonna have white collar people like that as well, who can't afford to live near where they work, have to commute 90 minutes, maybe it's 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. And you're gonna have that
But to that point, even
for over a long period of time. Maybe it's not a depression. Maybe the government doesn't let it hit depression level, but it's gonna be a perpetual recession where you have people just working to live, and you're gonna see people having to make decisions. How many how many ways do I sort of go against my values, or do I take opiates, or do I use a gun, or do I do I engage some type of civil unrest?
and
Because they're under
it.
illusion that we're still a capitalist society, and that we're still like democratic society, and we're not. The U.S. is done. The U.S. is done. It's a failed experiment. Um, Greece had its day. Rome had its day. Egypt had its day. The UK had its day. Germany had its day. The U.S. had its day. We're done. Period.
Listen, that is it though. That's why I say, are we in a mental health crisis? And to the point, even that you made about the commute, the work commute, even for those. Matter of fact, I forget if it was either Gardner or McKinsey that did a report from 2021 on the state of women in the workplace. And when you look at the amount, like, a couple of things stood out to me. The first thing that stood out to me was the percentage of women, and these were high, and specifically high earning women. Some of these, in some cases, I believe, like 15% or so of the high earning women earned either just as much, and I think some cases earned a bit more than their husbands or their life partners, and still decided to quit their jobs. And the reason that they decided or was contemplating quitting their jobs, because the line between work and life has been completely obliterated. Not just erased, but just obliterated, because they're still finding themselves taking on more of the household responsibilities, taking on more of the child care, for example, educating the children. Because, at that point, a lot of us, home had turned into the playground, had turned into the schoolhouse, had turned into the workplace. And having all of those things under one roof meant that you as a parent turned into the laborer, turned into the parent, turned into the teacher, turned into the janitor, turned into the maid, all at the same time. And there's no delineation between, well, when is it time for you to be the educator versus the maid versus the cook versus versus mom or dad. So when you see, in other words, when you see, irrespective of the cash that's coming into the household, and half of the parent, like half of the parents in the house are saying that we are contemplating quitting, although they by numbers, these were women that are making at least a few $100,000 a year, in some instances more. That irrespective of the cash coming in, that their mental health is being pushed beyond its limits, in other words. Certainly, when you go down that spectrum, like the socioeconomic spectrum, the same responsibilities are happening, the same dynamic within the household is happening, but you're combining that with less resources. Because at least those that are high earners can afford to get some additional help. If you're making 100K or less, how can you afford to pay a nanny 30K a year? How can you afford to bring in a cook at even 25K a year when you're making less than 100K a year? How can you afford additional help that alleviates the roles that you have to play? There is no, as soon as you get out of bed, that's one of the things that the report brought up, is that soon as you get out of bed, you're on. Like, you're at work. As soon as you open your eyes, you're at work. There is no more commute to even get your mind right that, okay, I'm going into work. You know, I get to focus on the one thing at a time. That's where kind of the rubber meets the road. So it's
Mm.
like, are we in the mental health crisis? Are we? Or is it that because of the mass manipulation in the economy and throughout our legislators, policymakers, and certainly the investor class, colluding and participating and eating at the same trough, while those that, even if they're in a comfortable, from a income lens, are making a comfortable living, are mentally pushed to a brink because there isn't any relief. What do we expect to happen for those that are making the country's median, which is still roughly 50K, 55K a year?
Right.
You know
But
what I
this,
mean?
I
So,
understand. But
so yeah, like, are we in a mental health crisis, or are
but this
people
is
just being pushed to the freaking brink, and now they have to pick up the opioids? Or
right,
now we see more folks like Tulsa, where
right,
they've been pushed to a brink. They have no kind of no healthy outlet, because every healthy outlet is expensive as hell. Let's just
right,
call it what it is. Every
right.
healthy outlet is expensive as hell, and
But
it's cost prohibitive. So it's cheaper to get a gun. It's literally cheaper to kill people
right,
than to actually provide means to help alleviate the economic and social pressures that people are faced with.
right. At least you'll be heard. At least you'll be heard if you get a gun. At least you'll be heard. And then
That's it.
the media said we need to get rid of guns. But this is what we've been talking about for a while. We're here now.
Yeah.
So people saying you're doom and gloomers. You're you're like on a fringe group. We're here now, and it can't be avoided. And I wonder, you know, why wouldn't people be crazy? Why wouldn't we have a drug problem in this country after
Right.
these failed policies, and it can't be avoided anymore? And now the Negro whispers, they're disappearing. They're nowhere to be found now. You even have Van Jones turning against the Democratic Party.
Yep.
Who would have thought that? But
And
but
crying about it, of course.
now the when it's officially announced we're in a recession after a decade of money printing and helping certain industries at the expense of the populace, we'll see what happens. I think the people are going to turn this country out of hell, and they should. Period. So that's Trump and the G. Thanks for tuning in. That's Trump and the G. That's Michael Novogratz co-signs Trump and the G Recession Talk. So we'll see.